Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call this conclave to order. So if people who are participating can either take a seat back here or come around here, wherever you want to be. I'm Michael Sussman. I'm a civil rights lawyer from Orange County. And a group of folks from Kingston have been working together to put together this truth-telling forum. We had one in Newburgh a couple of weeks ago. Many people came and spoke about their experiences with local police agencies. Our purpose here today is to give folks an opportunity to tell the truth about what's happened to them so that we can all share and hear what is going on amongst our community members. We encourage people to come and tell the truth because only through telling the truth loudly and clearly are we going to really formally and finally institutionalize change. My belief is that white America thinks this is going away. They're just patient. They're going to wait this out. And in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, nobody's going to care again. That's their impression. That's their hope. Our hope is that more and more people will feel the energy and commitment to come forward and tell the truth about what's gone on, forcing the issue, not letting the issue disappear and dissipate. Believe me, that's exactly what those in power want. So anybody who wishes to speak and tell the story that they've experienced, please come and do that and share it with everyone else right directly into this microphone. We hope, as we did in Newburgh in 2007 and 2012, to write up recommendations which will go some way toward putting together concretely what we want as a change. We need to do that because those in power are not going to genuinely listen, and they're not going to genuinely formulate anything meaningful to change the situation. They're going to do, frankly, as little as they can do after they try to wait this out. It's only by reflecting accurately what people in this community feel and believe and then fighting for that based on what you've expressed that we're going to get anywhere. So I encourage people to come forward and share their experiences. I hope some more people will feel comfortable coming. Of course, I want to recognize the people who are so helpful in putting this together. Michael, Joanne, Ishmael, my dear friend, Ms. Simmons, and others who are participating. So young man, I think you wanted to come up and speak. Please come right up. I say young man to everyone because I'm so old, so don't feel insulted.
Am I able to take this mask off?
Take it off.
Yeah, wait, let me wipe the mic for you. So we're not on the news. Is that okay, right?
Yes. Yes, please.
And there's,
Thank you very much. Do I like state my name? Or all right. This is fine. My name is Manuel Stiles, and I have had one bad experience with the cops, and I've had also a good experience with the cops. My bad experience started out when I had gotten into an altercation with my brother, and the cops were called. And I was sitting down, originally talking with one officer calmly. We were just relaxing, talking, just chatting. And then another officer had come into the house, and he came in aggressively. And then he grabbed me up, twisted up my arm, and started saying, "Stop resisting." And in no way was I resisting. And in that way, I felt like he was using excessive force. He was being totally out of line. And I had told him that. I made a complaint and everything. And then I've never heard anything back.
When was it?
I do not know the exact date. My bad for things. It was this year. I'm pretty sure it's this year. All right. My good experience with the cops, I had gotten into some trouble. I was with someone I shouldn't have been with. And an officer had pulled up, started talking to me calmly, professionally. And we just went from there. And it was just He was just all out a professional. I do not know his name. I don't know anything of that sort, but they were very professional about it. Kingston Police Department. They sorry. They had thrown me down on my kitchen floor and just kept telling me to stop resisting, twisting my arm up, and I had clearly kept stating that I was not resisting. I'm good. I'm not resisting. I'm going. And they just kept using excessive force, basically. They didn't take me anywhere. After that, they just sat me down. My brother never pressed any charges. Nothing was. Yeah. Yes, I had. Yes, I had. I think he was the chief or somewhere like close to that, and we had spoken. We had sat down. I had written what I had written, and then my brother's girlfriend at the time, who was a witness to the situation, had came down and written a statement also, and told them that they were really using excessive force. That's all I ever heard. No problem, sir.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Royer. So my family has been through a lot with the police departments locally. So I'll start with my daughter's case. I want to say that not only does KPD and the Sheriff's Department assault local residents, but they also pick and choose who they protect and serve, and that's a big problem also. So my daughter was assaulted, but 2 weeks before she was assaulted by KPD, she was involved in a hit and run, and right on Broadway. They had 3 letters to the license plate, and there was video footage at some of the stores on Broadway, but the officer that was taking care of her case went on vacation the next day and nothing was taking care of it until 2 weeks later she was assaulted by KPD. So she was on her way home from school to work. She was dropping off her backpack at a friend's house. There was 2 other girls that were in a fight, like kids do after school sometimes. And she was walking close to them. When the police came, the other 2 girls ran into some houses to get away from them, and they stopped my daughter and her friend, and they said, where did the girls go? They said to her friend, if you don't tell where these other girls went, we are going to arrest you for trespassing. So we shouldn't be giving 16-year-olds trespassing charges at the high school. This is a child that went to BOCES because she couldn't go to the high school, but she was getting dropped off by the school bus at the high school. So fast forward, my daughter's walking home. These officers start to arrest her friend for trespassing on the high school grass. And my daughter says, stop, you're hurting her. She tries to de-escalate the situation. She said, when did she trespass? Please stop hurting her. And then they punched my daughter in the face and told her to back the fuck up. So she did. And then like 6 to 7, maybe 10 cop cars came. It was Kingston Police Department, Sheriff's Department, and state troopers. They asked who else needed to be arrested. They pointed at my daughter. So they arrested my daughter also for obstruction of government administration. And then they slammed her against the cop car where she had, chest wall contusions. So now she had facial contusions, chest wall contusions. She went into an asthma attack. When they handcuffed her, she ended up with a sprained wrist. They put her in the back of a cop car with no cameras in it. All of the cop cars in Kingston have cameras in it, except the ones that carry our kids at the school or from the school or something to do with the schools, with the SROs. They put her in the back of that cop car while she was screaming that she couldn't breathe, and she was handcuffed. Her inhaler fell out of her pocket and fell onto the floor. The cops continued to touch her inappropriately, and she had on just leggings, so they knew she didn't have any pockets. She said, "No, that's my ass. My inhaler's right there on the ground." And they shut the door, and they didn't give her her inhaler until she got all the way to the police station. It's been 3 years, and it's still hard to tell that part of the story. So, if you have any questions about her case, I can answer them now. But I also have a son who was assaulted by the sheriff's department. Should I just tell both stories back to back? And then, so my son was shot 2 years ago on July 4th. He still has the bullet in his spine, not from the police. He was shot right here on Prospect Street, and his case hasn't been solved. Fast forward to November 20-something of 2019, my son was stopped for a loud muffler. He was taken out of the car twice. The first time he was allowed to hold on to the car because he's disabled. He's a paraplegic. His one leg doesn't work from the bullet still being in his spine. And the second time they ripped him out when he tested the authority of the officer, like saying like, you shouldn't give me this ticket because I have proper ID. They took him out of the car. They were screaming, and they cuffed him. And when they cuffed him, they pulled him backwards, knowing that he was disabled. His leg that doesn't work went up behind his back. He was rolling around on the ground trying to get it right. They were screaming at him to get up. They even tried to give him his cane with his hands cuffed behind his back. They called for crowd control. There was like 4 of us out there, and so it ended up 10 or 11 cop cars, an ambulance. My son was taken to the hospital, and they followed him to the hospital to give him the tickets.
What was this all about? What was the underlying incident?
For my son, he got stopped for a loud muffler. So she was trying to say to her friend, why are you arresting my friend? Please stop hurting my friend. Mm-hmm. She ended up with facial contusions, chest wall contusions, a sprained wrist. They withheld her inhaler for 15 to 20 minutes while she was screaming she can't breathe, and they touched her inappropriately in the back of the cop car. No one was ever held accountable for this. We filed complaints for both. Oh, my complaints? They told us that we had to find our own witnesses, and that they were going to table Elisa's complaint with the police commission until we found our own witnesses. And we went out door knocking a couple days. Matter of fact, for about a week straight, and everyone was scared to say what they seen, but there was a lot of people that seen it. No, not that I'm aware of. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment about one of Lisa's incidents with the police. She said that there were Kingston police, Ulster County sheriffs, and state police involved in that really minor incident, which brings up the question of how over-policed we are in this city. And I work often out of state, and I can drive 4 or 5 days to and from my hotel room to where I'm working and not see a single cop car. In Kingston, I can drive across town and see 5 cars, sheriffs, state police, Kingston police. What is going on? We really need to ask what is going on, and we need to start to think about how we want to be policed as a community, what kind of public safety we want as a community, not that law enforcement the way it is a given, and it's an absolute, and it just has to be that way. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know that. Does anybody know if there's a...
All right, testing. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming. I have 2 incidences. First incident was what happened to me in 1988. I was at a party with a couple of friends, and the police came. One of them hit me, I hit him back, but they ended up arresting me, threw me down 12 steps where I got a bruise right here, and then they put me in the car. My daughter, Africa, she was about 4 years old. She saw the officer hit me in the head. I ended up in the hospital. When I got out, I had a lawyer from Utica, Steve Lockwood, and this was a couple years later. But the pictures, when they took me to the jail, they took pictures, and the pictures disappeared. So I ended up losing the case because we didn't have any evidence. But then in '96, on Prospect Street where I live, my son was living with me. He was on the porch, and 2 officers came. One of them was Waltman. They came. He was trying to go in the house. They snatched him up. He was able to get away, but then they slammed his head to a tree in the back and beat him up real bad. What happened is I got him out of jail. I ended up doing a notice of claim and filed a federal lawsuit, 8183 lawsuit. In 2000, I was going to school, and they ended up wanting to settle with me. So I was talking to one of my professors, and he said, if your son wants to settle, then settle with him. So we won a lawsuit, but this is a continuous thing in the city of Kingston. I know a number of people that get beat up by the police, but they're afraid because they get threatened by the police, and this has to stop. And I'm trying to encourage people. I did talk to a lot of young kids that I know got beat up, but they're afraid to come here because if the police find out, they're afraid they're going to get beat up again. But I'm going to continue to try because it has to stop, because one day they're going to kill somebody. Thank you.
I'm too tall. Mic check. I'm really tall. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Simmons, and I would like to share 2 of my experiences with the cops. Thank God I've never been brutalized or beaten or abused physically, but I do have 2 instances when I feel like I've been mistreated or discriminated against. The first, I guess, occasion was back in 2000, and I want to say 13 or 14. I was driving my brother to work. He was late, and I may have been going a little over the speed limit, and a cop pulls me over. So I pull over. The cop, he comes up to the window, and he says, hello, license and registration, please. I give it to him. He asked me my name as if it wasn't on the ID, but I told him my name. He asked me where I was coming from. I said, I'm coming from home. He asked me where I was going. I said, I'm dropping my brother off to work. He's running a little late. I was driving my mom's BMW. He says, this is a very nice car that you're driving. I said, thank you. He says, is it yours? I say, no, it's my mom's. He says, are you sure it's your mom's? And I say, yeah, I'm sure it's my mom. And he looks at the registration and says, Imogene Simmons, is that your mom? Yes, it is. So after going back and forth for probably about a good 2 minutes, he went back to the car. He ran all of my stuff and credentials. He came back, and he gave me my ticket. That was example number one. Example number two, well, one, I didn't think that he needed to comment on how nice the car was to begin with. And number two, to ask me if it was my car and for me to answer him and say, no, it's my mother's car. For him to ask me if I was sure, I didn't find that appropriate because just the only thing that was going on in my mind is I believe had I been a white male, he wouldn't have asked me that. Just my personal opinion. I could be crazy. My second situation was, I want to say the end of 2019. I got into a car accident. My dad and I, my stepfather and I, we were on our way to work, and we were driving in ongoing traffic. Everything was fine. Nice, beautiful, sunny day. And an older white male who was at a stop sign, he pulled out into ongoing traffic, and he hits the side of our car. So we get out, we report the accident, we call it in, and a white cop comes, and he doesn't approach us. He goes straight to the older white gentleman, and he asks the older white gentleman if he's okay, what happened. And we're trying to tell, the cop, hey, listen, we're the one who called. We're trying to explain to him what happens. The guy shuts us down. He's like, no, I'm talking to this gentleman over here. So he continues to ask the older white gentleman if he's okay, what happened, and all of those things. Long story short, he collects all of our information, and he reports it. Not a single time did he ask us if we were okay. Not a single time did he ask us what happened. And that's what that was. Sure. Imogene Simmons, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi. I just want to add to that because that day that my son and my husband got in an accident, they called me and I came to the scene, and I was there when the police officer came and approached the older white male who actually hit my husband's car. I expressed to the police, I said, hey, we're the one who called you. And he was like, he said, he said, I'm taking care of it. I said, yeah, but we're the one who's calling you. Why are you talking to him? And he was like, it doesn't matter who called me. That's how he said it. It doesn't matter who. And I'm like, well, it does. I said, because he hit us, and we're the one who called you. The officer paid me no attention. He went and talked to the elder white man. I wasn't on scene like when it happened, but to be there and be there when he came, they walked past my husband, they walked past my son. I verbalized that, hey, what's wrong with this picture? And he blew me like I didn't even matter. So I was there. I just wanted to add that portion of it.
How many African-American police officers are currently employed in Kingston, the city of Kingston?
I don't know that. I don't see when.
One? You said one?
One. Ishmael says one.
One in the whole city?
And while I'll wait till you're done, Mr. Sussman. I guess I'll share.
Information to try to understand the situation. Approximately how many police officers are there in the city? Does anyone know?
72.
And one of 72? Has there been an African-American in a leadership position in the police department as of today?
No.
Not now, but historically there has been?
No.
My name is Joan Horton. I live in Midtown. I've lived in Midtown for 20 years. I remember when I first moved to Midtown, there weren't sheriffs and there weren't DEC and there weren't stadies in Midtown. And I remember when the mayor at the time was making a big deal about how that would really help us out and how that was a big discussion, especially in the comments section of the Freeman, and everybody wanted that to happen. And now we have, like everywhere you go, there's cops all day, all night. Let's see. My own personal experiences, the last not so great experience I had with a cop in Midtown, I had helped somebody with a really bad medical thing, and he was leaving my house and he was driving a little funny, and I was trading cars with him. And so when he left, I kind of drove around the corner to see if he was really driving badly. And I guess I didn't signal on the way around the corner, and I guess there was a cop like lurking, and the cop like followed me without putting his lights on. And the guy pulled over around, just further up the road, and I sort of pulled over to see if he was going to keep going, and I called him and talked to him, and he said, oh, he just pulled over for this, and he was really fine. And I was like, okay, and then I just drove back home. I was just excessive care. We were switching out cars. It was no big deal. I went back to my house. I pulled into my driveway. I was about to pull into my driveway, and this cop hits his lights. And I pull into my driveway, and he pulls up behind me, and he's like, get out of the car. And I'm like, well, that's not normally what you do, So I get out of the car, and I put my hands up, and he says, this isn't even your house. This isn't even your house. And I'm like, Jesus. I said, no, this is really my house. He's like, well, that's convenient, huh? And I'm like, yeah, kind of, I guess. And then he says, something about me having an expired license, and like actually I'd been taking care of a sick guy who was very, very sick and was sicker than I thought. And so I forgot to, when my birthday came, like 2 weeks before, I didn't do my license. So I said, well, I forgot, and usually like a cop would be normal and be like, oh, no big deal. But he was like, I could tow your car right now and arrest you. And I was like, that seems a little over the top. He's like, he was really heavy. Like, he just was insanely heavy. He's like, I want to know what you were doing. And I was like, it's none of your business what I was doing. Why did you stop me? Like, and he's like, well, I'll tell you why I stopped you. You were driving irregularly. You were acting erratically. I was like, did I break any laws? And, if I drive in a way that makes you curious, I don't think that's against. He's like, that's it. I'm taking you in and I'm taking your car. I was like, just total bullying until I explained to him what had happened. He's like, that's not so hard, is it? And then he gave me a ticket for having an expired license, driver's license, which I don't know. I think it still cost me some money. And it was just like he was just, power tripping for no reason because I made him curious and he was an asshole. And the fact that cops that was Schultz, by the way, that was Kingston, Schultz. Another time, one of my kids dialed 9. Just 9, not 9-1, not 911. Just, it was back when we, had a handset for 5 minutes because, Time Warner and whatever. Dialed 9. And I had a friend over, the same friend, was on dialysis, so he had bone, density, no bones. And he opened the door and said, hold on a second, I think she's upstairs. And he went to close the door. And the cop was like, whoa! And just practically knocked him on his ass. The guy must have weighed like 120 pounds, and Mr. Testosterone had to... But, for no reason, no reason. And afterwards, and I talked to Tinty about that incident, and he was like, well, you could have been in danger. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that a dialing 9 was a cry for help, My kid didn't know to dial 1 before 914, and of course there was a 914 call within seconds afterwards, and they're the police, and they could have figured that out, I also had problems with the Waltman family. When my son was in middle school, Harry Waltman decided that Eamon was a bad kid and surveilled him, like literally surveilled him, you know. And basically, when Eamon went to high school, he had a reputation, and the security guards were really like always looking after him. And I finally took him out of school. I just was like, no, I can't put my kid in this position where, you know, this brilliant, good kid who had great grades before coming to this high school, you know, feels like a pariah. So I put him in Sudbury and, you know, spent money we didn't have. And, you know, he started college kind of behind, and he's a little behind in college now, but he's doing great. But, you know, like, this is because the Waltmans have been fostered as pit bulls for the last, how many years? You know, and everything's, Officer Harry's a great guy. So anyway, I mean, no, really. I mean, and the school resource officers, we don't need them. We just don't need them.
I want to make a couple of brief comments. I think one of the things we need to be working on is something called DART. DART is Direct Action Response Teams. A DART means this: when anyone gets word in the community of any questionable situation, we need to be able to mobilize people to that situation immediately. In Newburgh recently, a young woman who'd been in the Marines for 4 years and is now working at West Point, she's all about 5'2" and 100 pounds, was stopped on Liberty Street at midnight for going literally around a pothole. Immediately, she texted her parents. Parents are divorced. Both of them came with their whole tribes, literally. And when you see the video, you see 30 people on the street and 11 police cars there for a young woman who had avoided a pothole, literally. But what diffused the situation or counterbalanced the situation was the direct action response. People showed up. They showed up to ensure some accountability for the police. Second point, Amari Shakur in Newburgh has spent the last decade amassing literally files full of videos of police misconduct. When we have a case against an officer for beating someone up in Newburgh, if you call Amari Shakur is going to have an encyclopedic set of files of that officer doing the same thing in other situations, literally. We need to be using technology to video these police and their conduct, and we need to be creating a record. Third point, a month ago, after about 20 years of effort by a number of us, and I've been involved in that literally for probably 20 or 25 years, the New York legislature finally said that police records are not themselves going to be forever shielded, and disciplinary records of police officers are now publicly available. That's the repeal of 50A of the New York State Civil Rights Law. By that law, there had been the shielding of these records. Now, I believe this. In this community, if there are identifiable police officers who you know have engaged in misconduct more than once, someone should file a FOIL, Freedom of Information Act request, and get the records of those officers. You have every right now as citizens to get those records and review those records and see what disciplinary action, what investigative action even has been taken, if any, against these officers. My experience in Yonkers, I once had to sue a police officer 13 times for brutality, Mr. Montero, 13 times. The 13th time, the police chief in 1987 called me on the phone and said to me, "Mike, what should I do with the officer?" I said, "You're in charge of the police department, not me." He says, "I'm firing the police officer." 3 hours later, Ray Montero called me on the phone after my suing him 13 times. "My due process rights were violated. Can you represent me?" They fired me. Ludicrous, okay? But what we need to do is we need to develop what amounts to a people's registry. The People's Registry has got to contain information about these officers, so we are providing accountability. I say that because we're pretty sure that the city administration in this city, as well as most others, is not doing it. They don't want litigation. They don't want accountability. They're afraid if they themselves point out the officers, that'll engender lawsuits. In other words, the nonsense, the defensiveness. So there are very concrete things folks in Kingston, as well as Newburgh, as well as Middletown, as well as Poughkeepsie, as well as Beacon, can start to do to enhance accountability. This is what's going to make this more than a fleeting moment. If we don't do this, it's going to be a fleeting moment. They're going to wait us out, and they're going to say, okay, everybody was interested in this in May and June and early July, and they went on to something else. It got too hot for them. The weather got hot. They got distracted. So I'm suggesting some concrete things that folks in Kingston can work on. I'm happy to try to help. The other thing that I really strongly recommend is court watching. We've done that in other parts of this county and in other parts of the region. It's inspired by the following insight. You go to court and you see a young white man who's accused of something. He comes with his parents. He's dressed up in a suit and tie, and he goes before the judge, and he's got a DWI. He's 19 years old. And the judge says, how are you doing at college? How are things going for you? Almost apologetically that the man is before the court. It's so nice that your parents are here. I'll give you some probation. Maybe I don't want to interfere with your schooling. And then the young black man comes up, the African-American man, the Hispanic man comes up before the court, same age, same charge. You know, you were going really fast. You could have killed somebody. What's the problem? What are you doing? Can't you get control of yourself? We've seen that over and over in this valley. And what counterbalances that is you being a court watcher. You go to the court clerk, and you say, I'm here from Kingston United. And we're here to do a court watching program to ensure that this court lives up to New York State standards of gender equality, racial equality, national origin equality. All the chief judge in New York State has said our courts have to operate that way. We're here to watch and make sure that's happening. Be very bold and tell them that's what you're doing. Don't be ashamed of what you're doing. That's what you're doing. And see what happens with that same judge. Okay? We have got to interpose ourselves between the injustice that's going on that we know about. Another way to understand this is we talk about institutional racism all the time, but no institutions are racist. Who are we talking about? What are we talking about? Are we dreaming? So that's what they believe. They believe we're dreaming. And they'll say, oh, yeah, we have institutionalized racism. But when it's that institution, it's never happened. Believe me, it's never happened. So we, in a way, continually have to prove, as you did with your mother's BMW, that you could have a BMW. Why could you have a BMW? How'd your mother get that BMW? Right? That's the society we're still living in. How did you get that? So these are some concrete things I think we can do from this forum. And I'm encouraging people to get together and try to institutionalize some of these measures so we can move beyond where we are. If we don't have the energy to do it, nobody's going to do it. It's that simple. Now, we're here to hear other people, not me. Does anyone else want to talk about any experiences they've had with the police which cause them concern? It doesn't matter what your race is. We know that when the police get away with this against people of color, it seeps down to white people who don't have means. This goes on in the society. Come on up. This is what goes on. This kind of behavior. Miss Augustine.
Hi, my name is Donna Augustine. My son, Stephen Augustine, was murdered. He was walking home from the corner store and he was attacked. He lived for 23 months. He suffered. He was paralyzed. He couldn't talk. He was awake, though. He could cry. He felt pain. The evidence disappeared. A lot of the evidence wasn't even processed. They told me all along that there was a tape that showed my son being hit once and him falling to the ground. When I pushed to get the tape and through the Freedom of Information Act, and also through Channel 7. We finally got the tape, and it was tampered with. The beginning of the tape was completely clear. You could see everything, and then it went all static, and then it went completely clear again. It took them 3 days to come back down to the hospital before they took DNA samples off of my son. I had to complain and yell for them even get them down there. It's a total nightmare. It's still not settled. It's Mr. Clegg has opened up the investigation again. On Greenkill Avenue, he was leaving Storts. He left the Storts store at 10:51, and the ambulance and the fire truck came at 11:07. So between that short period of time, he got across the street with his head bashed open in the parking lot. And they said that he was only hit once. All of his hospital records say blunt force trauma. He was hit multiple times with a baseball bat. He had 3 separate fractures and all facial fractures and nasal fractures. Half of his head ended up gone. It had to be replaced twice. He suffered unbelievably. I couldn't even tell you how much he suffered to live. And he trying to get rid of me, yelling at me to stop going to the media, telling me to shut my mouth and to stop causing trouble. They used to do it through crime victims. They told her what to say, and then she would come to me. Don't be going on TV. You don't want to get them mad at you. You don't know what's going to happen to you. It was constant threats and intimidation. The whole time, through the whole thing, it's still going on. I just pray that the truth finally comes out and we find out what happened to the tape, if it was tampered with. If we find out that the evidence was taken and it wasn't processed, that's another problem. And they never investigated it thoroughly either. They invested it to their advantage. So I don't know, I'm just praying. I thank you all for listening to me, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Hi. My name is Christopher Lapinell, and this incident didn't happen to me, but I was a witness. And this took place in New York City, in Queens, where I was living at the time. I was walking home at night, and around the corner from where I lived, there was an establishment. And in front of the establishment, I saw a couple that was fighting, and it was starting to get physical. I stopped at the corner and watched for a little while because I could see that it was heating up, becoming more intense. And before long, the guy was choking the woman. And so I started to approach, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Because I'm not a big guy. And they ran across the boulevard to the median that was there, and at this point he had her in a headlock and had thrown her to the ground, and he was punching her. And so finally I ran up and I started screaming at the man, and I said, and this is back before there were cell phones, so I told him that I was going to go across the street, pointed out the payphone at the gas station, said I was going to call the cops on him. Fortunately, somebody else had already called the cops, and they arrived basically as I arrived at the payphone. 2 cop cars pulled up. One had 2 male officers, and they immediately started questioning the guy. And then the female officer, she questioned the woman first, and then she questioned me, as I was the witness there. And she was taking down full notes. And was very open, very receptive to everything that I was saying. But basically, as soon as the 2 male officers had finished interviewing the perpetrator, they approached and they started listening to what I was, the version of the story that I was telling the female officer, and immediately started undercutting everything that I was saying, trying to find some other explanation for what was going on. Oh, did she hit him? Oh, wait, yeah, you said that she had a pocketbook. She must have, did she slap him with it? And everything that they could to try and make it seem as though this was not an act of just overt aggression of a man that was basically, if not intentionally, bound to kill this woman if someone hadn't intervened. And I had given my name, my number, my address. I said, please, contact me. I am willing to testify. I am a witness. Nothing ever came of it. And I was always, it's bothered me all these years. Just the sight of this woman being attacked so viciously, and knowing that the police officers were literally doing everything that they could not to intervene, not to do anything to help this woman. That's my story.
So everyone who's listening to that story should know a couple of important things. First of all, the police are under no duty to protect any of you. A police officer could be driving by here and seeing some horrible event and choose to do nothing, and something could befall you, and you could then sue, or your estate could sue and say the police were negligent. They didn't intervene. The law is they have no special duty to you. Listen carefully. They have no special duty to you. When you talk about remaking policing and understanding the notion of they have a duty to serve, the law is they have no duty to serve. Now, with regard to domestic violence, all over the country, women call me about domestic violence. This is the real, from my perspective, what I've heard over 30 years, the real story. Women who are abused are often women who have no resources, and they have no recourse to the legal system. And they go to the legal system, and often the male has far dominant resources. So therefore, you have an unequal playing field. You have no legal services, no national legal services devoted to domestic violence, nothing. Moreover, carefully, this is very important. You're a woman. You've called the police. The police don't show up. They don't show up. You get murdered. You get beaten. You want to sue the police department. Guess what? You say, I called. They didn't come. They have no special duty to you. They have no duty to come. This is the only time you can sue them, if they've affirmatively encouraged the aggression. So in a famous case I did about 16 years ago, we had a woman who repeatedly called the police. The police came, they saw her bruising, and they talked about the Super Bowl and the New York Yankees and how her partner had given a fire truck to the town they lived in, and they left and they did nothing. And the court said in that situation, they affirmatively condoned and encouraged the brutality because they were there and they saw it, and by reacting the way they did, they gave the man the understanding that he could do whatever he wanted to the woman. That's an exceptional case. So we have a radical reformation of our laws are needed in this regard too. And again, we're not really working on it. We're docile. We're angry for 1 minute, and for 10 minutes we're asleep. For 1 minute we're agitated because we heard of a terrible case, and for 15 minutes we forgot that case. So there's got to be a commitment that we share, because one person can't make these changes. It doesn't happen that way. Understand what needs to be changed and work together to change it. And remember, there's a synchronicity here. There's a connectivity between the way the police treat people of color, the way they treat women, the way they treat disabled people. There's a seamless transition from oppressing one group to oppressing another group to oppressing another group, including poor white people, who often get the same kind of dismissive treatment. Once it's inbred in the culture, it spreads. And that's what we need to deal with. The culture of carelessness and caringlessness and abuse of power and arrogance. That's what we're hearing described tonight. Michael, did you want to speak?
I just want to thank everybody who did come and got to listen to some of these stories. We're going to keep the mic open for a while longer. But this is just the beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Later in August, early September, mid-September, we're trying to have another meeting, another forum, probably indoors at that point. And we're going to keep on building on this because there are so many people, this is just the tip of it, there are so many people that are afraid to come forward and tell their stories. One other thing I wanted to be mindful of is the catalyst that's brought us out tonight, that's brought us out over the past 2 months, and that's George Floyd. Let's just take a moment to acknowledge that he sacrificed, and we're here, and we're going to continue, and we're going to make the kind of change that Michael Sussman talks about.
I believe all people, all humans, should not be treated differently. We're all humans. We are as one. Like, everybody treating anybody differently should not happen. You're a human just as me, and that's all there is to it. Like, no matter if you're wearing a badge, a uniform, you're a human. You should be treated with the same dignity and respect as me, no matter your color, etc. No problem.
It's all right. I've got a question, actually. My question is, if there is no direct prerogative, if there's no specific duty to the public on the part of the police to protect and serve, what is their explicit purpose? I mean, why do they exist?
Right? You already know the answer to this, right, Christopher? So you know the answer, right? So I want to remind everybody that policing was started from slave catching, right? And that the systems that are in place right now are systems from then, and they've been passed on down generation to generation. We know this because the police officers are family to family in this since the beginning, right? So I just wanted to add that point, but I know you want to add more.
Okay, it's my understanding that the slave catchers was only part of the reason. Okay. My understanding is that the slave catching part was only part of the reason why police were formed. It started with the way that the Constitution in that was formed to begin with. And it grew out of that. It's about protecting the rights of the rich from the poor. When you have a republic, not a full democracy, because if it was a full democracy, the rich would be outnumbered. So, therefore, the way that the system is structured is to protect the rights of the minority. So the minority is the rich. So you have the police departments that came into being. They started out of like you said, out of slave catching, and they started from private, like, security type of things for the protecting the rich, and they decided at one point, well, gee, why do we have to pay for this out of our pocket? We can get the taxpayers to pay for this. Hence, you get a municipality police department. So my thing is that if we know that the police department is not here to actually protect and serve, it's not here to take care of us, it's here to protect the rich and private property from us, from the poor, the working class. That's what they're here for. Don't ever get it twisted that it's about anything else. And so, and the other thing that I wanted to make about you were what you had mentioned about them not being having to, respond if something's happening to us. It's my understanding legally that if something is to occur, if something is occurring, I hate speaking the mic, something is occurring, like a crime is occurring, and we witness it, we're obligated to do something, whether it be to call the police or to do something. We're obligated to do that. And so if we're obligated to respond that way, how come they're not? Right. For you to intervene. So then why is it that you hear when people haven't done anything, the cops try to give them a hard time about not reporting things? Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm just going to echo what the other woman just said. I'm sorry we didn't get your name. I'm Michael. Deirdre, what Deirdre just said. The police exist to protect private property. Nothing else. Zero. That's what they exist to protect. They exist to maintain existing class and race relations. Let me say that again. They exist to maintain existing class and race relations. If there were no police, we, the most of us, the 99%, whatever terminology you want to use, would be knocking at the doors of the 1%, of the 5%, and saying, why do we have to struggle for food? Why do we have to struggle for medical care? Why do we have to struggle to have a place to live? There are so many things, and that's why this system would not work without the police. And the people at the top know that, and everybody on down just replicates that system. We have a structural problem with criminal justice and policing. We have an institutional problem with the institution of the police. There are really exciting things happening. You've heard a lot about Minneapolis. I'll be posting on the event page and on some of the other pages some of the community organizations that have sprung up out of Minneapolis. Everybody heard, oh wow, the city council in Minneapolis wants to disband the police department. What does that mean? Really, what does that mean? Well, they've been working on it for years. And they've come up with alternatives to policing. They've come up with new models of public safety. They understand that there's going to need to be some kind of an armed force for whatever incidents may exist. But 95% of the things that the police respond to can be given to other organizations within the community. Minneapolis has worked this out. They've thought it through. Let's learn from them. Let's come up with our own ideas. Let's keep the exchange going.
So I think it's already been said. I want to say it in my words. We know why the police came into existence, right? And it was to protect property. Came out of Massachusetts with ports protecting capitalism. That's what it's all about. We've moved from slavery to mental oppression. That's where people of color, poor white people, that's where we are right now. So the police's presence, they're aware of the physical or the mental distress that certain marginalized groups experience by their presence. And it's just to keep the status quo, to keep people in their places, and to just make us afraid. And I'll say, as a black woman, and I have sons, I'm afraid. It's the reality. When my kids jump in their car and they go out at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, it's a real thing that I'm really afraid that my son is going to end up dead. A simple traffic stop. Or they're going to smash his face down or whatever. And this code blue, I'm not saying all police officers are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But the force as a whole, acting like they're God. It's social control. It's to perpetuate the mental oppression. Like Mike and so many have others said, it's about maintaining, keeping their job. because that's what it's all about. Once again, marginalized people are being exploited to provide jobs, benefits, and everything else that the police officers get and the others in the criminal justice system. And I want to say one other thing. I'm just going to go there. I had the opportunity to participate in some forums that were held with the police commissioner, the DA, and it was held right here in the city of Kingston, faithfully, like every month. And I saw these, whether it was the chief of police, the district attorney, the mayor at the time, and you had constituents were bringing their complaints. This was supposed to be a forum where you hear from the people, because I believe that change, I'm an HR professional. Anybody knows any kind of organizational change should not come from the top down. We know that. The people that are impacted should have the buy-in. They should participate in this process. Well, at these forums, I saw people speak up, and they were literally getting shut down. People were using their authority and their power, and they just shut them down. So all of these forums, and now we're here today. We have this council, city council here, that's proposing police reform for people they haven't even met, you know? So I'm just like, it's all messed up. I agree with Mr. Sessman. Since the murder of George Floyd, we got people marching. We got people been rallying up here in the park. We got social justice organizations. People are following their lead. In my opinion, and from what I know, it's going to take people on an individual level to learn, to educate themselves, to become empowered. Because anybody can rally around an organizer, this and that. Who do you see out here now? You've been seeing people marching, like Mr. Sussman said. You've been seeing marches all over the country. What now? You going to let it die down? There's disparities, there's inequalities, there's injustices in different areas, not just criminal justice, healthcare, education, all of this stuff, right? So I just charge those who are really trying to fight for not just police, to end police brutality and unjust criminal justice systems. If you're going to have the social justice fight, whether it be for equality, based upon any identity construct, whether it's race, gender, or whatever, don't pick and choose, and don't do it superficially. And to any of these authoritative figures who are listening to me right now, take the opportunity to use your position of power and represent the people and be their voice. Be representative of them. Don't be a coon. Don't go along with the powers that be. Stand up and walk in a true conscience and really push for change. That's all I got to say, okay?
Let me add one message here that I think is complementary to what you've said, many of you have said. If I make a list that starts with George Floyd, includes Eric Garner, includes DJ Henry. If you don't know these names, look them up. Includes Kenneth Chamberlain, includes Breonna Taylor, includes Mr. Arbery, includes David Baker in Aurora, Colorado, includes Michael Lemhart in Newburgh, includes Rex Fincher in Newburgh, includes Nathaniel Cobb in Newburgh, includes Charlie Parker in Port Jervis. I'll tell you one thing these 11 names have in common. Every one of them was shot and killed by a police officer, and every one of them was engaged in behavior which was either they were asleep or close to asleep, as in Miss Taylor's case. They were coming home from a homecoming, in DJ Henry's case, engaging in no criminality whatsoever. They were asleep like Kenneth Chamberlain, a veteran, in his apartment in White Plains. Read the case, it's shocking. They were selling rogue cigarettes on a street, like Eric Garner. They were passing a maybe $20 counterfeit bill, like Mr. Floyd. These are police interactions with no predicate, with no basis that any logical person in a million years could think would ever escalate. Think about Amadou Diallo, okay? All of these cases, a litany, and we can name 100 others. And I could name 100 others. And I could name many I've represented, families I've had the honor to represent. The people were engaging in no behavior that was criminal at all. And if it was literally the level of what we call in the law a violation. It's not even a crime. Some of them were engaged in nothing. Now, when we were in Newburgh, and Michael, you were in Newburgh, what did we hear repeatedly? And this is what we heard. African American people were being stopped by police in routine police stops. And what was happening? Disrespect, as Mr. Simmons spoke about earlier, disrespect. Sometimes it escalated to physical force, being arrested for no reason, being handcuffed for no reason. Whereas a Caucasian in that same situation, if it was me, they would have apologized for stopping me. My children would ride around with their father driving 80 miles an hour. Dad, why are you speeding? We have to get somewhere. I've got to do something. Police would stop me. Oh, Mr. Suss, sorry. Sorry for what? I'm driving 80 miles an hour. Give me a goddamn ticket. Okay? That's the message. That's the message my children saw. You talk about white privilege. They saw it, they saw it, they saw it. Every one of my 7 children saw that. So my point is, we have too much policing, Montella said, too many bored police. How can 11 police cars come to Sequoia's stop? Don't they have anything to do? This is Newburgh. They're supposed to be a high-crime city. This is the high crime, avoiding a pothole on Liberty Street. So these are the arguments we have to make when we talk about over-policing. Every one of these cases stems from nothing. We have the arguments. We have to make them. And we have to make them till we're blue in the face and till the powers that be listen. And we have to make them across any racial, generational, any lines. Because we all, as the gentleman said, this young man, Mr. Stiles, we all are human. That's the fundamental commonality. And we've got to elevate that in our conversation. So I appreciate everyone coming out. We're having these all over the valley. We're going to have them in small communities and large communities, and we're going to continue to have them, as Michael said, more than once in one place. Because we have to stimulate more interest, and we have to get to the point where we have concrete proposals that we put the people in power and force them to respond rationally. Okay? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deandra Sangetti Daniels. I'm not from Kingston, but I live in Oneonta, New York. It's like an hour and a half away. I just wanted to share with you an experience I had actually 2 days ago with the Oneonta Police Department in my town. We assembled a memorial for all, it was a Say Their Names memorial, and our the chief of police actually wrote a letter to our common council discouraging their approval for the memorial. So luckily it was approved anyway, and we put it up, and we had a beautiful ceremony on Sunday, and I shared a little bit about the hesitation on the police chiefs about the memorial. So granted, as a black person, I have family members in Oneonta, and then this morning the article came out where it basically like called out the chief of police in Oneonta. And at first I was really excited because Chief Brenner is actually praised for like being more progressive in our town. But then I started thinking about the negative backlash I would receive from it. And I think that's really where police capitalize on, is that mental oppression and that fear, because it really, luckily, I didn't succumb to that pressure, but I know a lot of people are really hesitant to speak out against the police because they're afraid that, oh, now they can easily find out where I am, they can pull me over, they can harass my family members, and we see over and over again, interactions with the police doesn't always go so smoothly for black men specifically, but also as a black woman. You know, Breonna Taylor really struck with me because she was doing nothing criminal, as was mentioned earlier. But one last thing before I end, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, police aren't supposed to kill criminals either. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah, and it's crazy that we have to stand here and say that, but no interactions with the police should end in death, and we see school shooters being arrested without any incident, and they're all taken into custody without any problems, and yet we see people who have an out traffic light getting shot and killed in front of their family members. So I think the mental oppression is a big part, and I know not a lot of people really realize how impactful it can be, because it really is a deterrent. When I know specifically too for rape victims, if they are raped by police officers, who do you go to? You know what I mean? And we have numbers on people that are raped by police officers, but we know that's going to be much higher, because when they are going to report, they're being discouraged and turned away or ignored until they give up. So I want to thank you all for listening. I know I'm not from Kingston, but I'm an ally in Kingston's struggle. And I actually would love to talk about potentially having a forum like this in Oneonta. So if anyone could help me with that, just come find me afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. This is the first of many community speak outs. A speak out is open to anyone. It's owned by no one. We don't have leadership, and we don't shut down conversation. We don't shut down discussion. You're free to come up and say anything you want, and we're going to continue this. So thank you again for coming.